I want to tell you something that changed everything for me, and I believe it will change everything for you too. There was a moment, years ago, when I sat at my kitchen table with bills I couldn't pay, dreams I couldn't reach, and a heart so heavy I could barely breathe. I had been saying my prayers. I had been working hard. I had been doing everything right, or so I thought. And still, nothing flowed. Everything felt blocked. Have you ever been there? Where you're doing all the things, saying all the words, but the windows of heaven seem locked tight. That morning, something inside me whispered to look again at the words of Jesus. But differently this time. Not as religious doctrine, not as distant scripture, but as actual keys. Living keys to unlock what I now call overflow. And what I discovered hidden in plain sight in those ancient teachings absolutely shattered everything I thought I knew about lack, struggle, and limitation. Jesus spoke a language most people never learned to hear. He wasn't just teaching morality. He was teaching metaphysics. He was teaching the actual laws of manifestation, of supply, of abundance that flows like a river when you know the secret words, the hidden keys. And today, I'm going to share those keys with you, exactly as they were shown to me. Because someone listening right now is standing where I once stood, wondering why the blessings aren't flowing, why the doors aren't opening, why abundance feels like a foreign country you can never visit. But I promise you this, by the time we're finished here, you will understand why everything has felt blocked, and more importantly, you will know the exact words and the exact spiritual technology Jesus was actually teaching to bring overflow into every single area of your life. Not someday, not in heaven, right here, right now, on this earth, in your bank account, in your relationships, in your peace, in your purpose. Are you ready? Because this isn't just information, this is transformation. And it begins the moment you truly hear what has been hidden in those words all along. Now let me tell you why this matters so desperately right now, in your life, today. You've been taught that abundance is hard, that you must struggle, that you must earn your worth through suffering and sacrifice and endless striving. The world has told you that overflow, that true abundance, is only for the lucky few, the chosen ones, the people born into the right families or the right circumstances. But Jesus taught something completely different, and they buried it. They hid it under layers of religious control and guilt and shame. He said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you." He said, "All that the Father has is yours." He said, "Ask and you shall receive, seek and you shall find, knock and the door will be opened." These aren't pretty phrases to embroider on pillows. These are literal instructions for operating the universe. Jesus understood something that quantum physics is only now beginning to prove. That consciousness creates reality. That your word has power. That what you speak, what you truly believe, what you claim in the invisible realm manifests in the visible world. He called it faith. I call it the law of mind, the law of manifestation. And here's what nobody tells you. The reason you're not experiencing overflow isn't because you're not good enough, or because God is withholding from you, or because you haven't suffered enough. It's because you haven't learned the language. The hidden language. The words that activate the flow. Jesus spoke constantly about this flow. He called it living water. He said, "Whoever drinks of this water will never thirst again, and it will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." Eternal life doesn't just mean living forever in some distant heaven. It means limitless life, overflowing life, abundant life right here, right now. Let me take you back to a story that illustrates exactly what I mean. There was a woman who came to me once, desperate. Her name was Margaret. She was a widow. Her husband had died suddenly, leaving her with 3 children, a mortgage, and no clear way forward. She had prayed. Oh, how she had prayed. She had begged God for help. She had pleaded with the universe. She had cried herself to sleep night after night asking why. And still, the bills piled up. The bank threatened foreclosure. Her children needed things she couldn't provide. She felt abandoned by God, by life, by every promise she'd ever been taught. When she sat in my living room that afternoon, she said something I'll never forget. She said, "Florence, I've done everything right. I've been good. I've been faithful. So why is God punishing me?" And He looked at her with all the love in my heart, and I said, "Darling, God isn't punishing you. You're punishing yourself with your words." She looked confused, almost angry. "What do you mean?" she asked. And I said, "For months you've been speaking lack, you've been affirming poverty. Every time you say, 'I can't afford this, I don't have enough, I'll never make it, what will become of us?' You are setting that condition in motion. You're using the law backwards." And then I taught her what Jesus actually taught, the hidden key, the secret that changes everything. I taught her about the Word made flesh, how in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. How everything that exists was first a word, a thought, a vibration spoken into form. I taught her that she had been given dominion, that she could speak to the mountains in her life and command them to move, not beg them, not plead with them, command them. And I gave her new words. Living words, power words based directly on what Jesus taught. Every single day, I had Margaret speak these words out loud. "I am the daughter of the King, and all that the Father has is mine. There is no lack in the kingdom. My supply is infinite and immediate. The windows of heaven are open over my life. Overflow is my birthright and my current reality." I watched her face as she spoke them the first time. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Something inside her was remembering. Some ancient knowing was waking up. She said she felt silly, like she was lying, because nothing in her physical reality matched these words. And I told her what I'm telling you now. The physical reality is the lie. The words of truth are what's real. You're not lying when you claim your abundance. You're lying every single time you agree with lack, because lack is not of God. Limitation is not of God. Struggle is not of God. Jesus said, "I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly." Not scarcity, not barely enough. Abundantly. Overflowing, more than enough. Margaret committed to speaking these words every morning. And every night, she stopped complaining about her situation. She stopped rehashing the problems. Every time fear whispered, "What if you lose the house?" she spoke back louder. "My supply comes from God, and God's supply is limitless. I cannot lose what is divinely mine." Within 3 weeks, completely, unexpected, a legal settlement from her husband's death that had been tied up for over a year suddenly came through. The exact amount she needed, plus more. A friend offered her a job she was perfectly suited for. Her children's school provided scholarships she didn't even know existed. The flow began. And it didn't stop, because she had learned the language, the hidden words, the words that open the windows of heaven and bring overflow. Now I need you to understand something crucial that Jesus taught but most people completely miss. He said, "You will know them by their fruits." He was talking about false prophets, yes, but he was teaching a deeper principle. The principle that your inner world, your consciousness, your beliefs, your words, will always produce outer fruit. Always, without exception. This is law. If you're experiencing lack, limitation, closed doors, blocked blessings, you must look at the seeds you've been planting with your words and your thoughts. Most people are gardeners planting weeds and praying for roses. They speak poverty and expect prosperity. They affirm sickness and want health. They declare loneliness and desire love. It doesn't work that way. The law is impersonal and exact. What you consistently speak and believe must manifest. Must. Jesus knew this. That's why he said so carefully, "By your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned." Your words aren't just describing your reality, they're creating it. And here's the part that makes this even more powerful and more urgent. Jesus taught that we are to speak to the condition, not about it. When he stood before Lazarus's tomb, he didn't say, "Oh dear, Lazarus is dead, this is terrible, what shall we do?" No. He spoke directly to death itself and commanded, "Life, Lazarus, come forth." When he faced the storm on the sea, he didn't panic and discuss how big the waves were. He spoke to the storm, "Peace, be still." He treated the invisible realm as more real than the visible one. And that's exactly what you must learn to do. Stop discussing your problems. Stop rehearsing your lack. Stop giving press conferences about everything that's wrong. Instead, speak to the situation with the authority Jesus said you have. Speak to your bank account and command increase. Speak to your body and command health. Speak to your relationships and command harmony. You have this power. You've always had it. Jesus revealed another hidden key that most people rush right past, and it's one of the most important things I can share with you today. He taught continuously about the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Let that sink in. Not the Father's reluctance. Not the Father's need for you to prove yourself worthy. The Father's pleasure. It pleases God to bless you. It delights the universe to give you overflow. You're not begging a stingy deity. You're not trying to manipulate a reluctant source. You're aligning with infinite abundance that wants to flow through you even more than you want to receive it. But here's where people get stuck. They try to figure out the how. They need to see the way before they take the step. Jesus taught the opposite. He said things like, stretch out your hand. To a man with a withered hand. Before the healing. The stretch came first, the healing came second. He said, launch out into the deep for a catch. To fishermen who had fished all night and caught nothing. Their logic said, there's no fish here. We've tried. It's pointless. But they obeyed the word anyway. And the catch was so abundant their nets began to break. The overflow came after the obedience to the word, not before. You'll never see the how before you claim the truth. The how appears after you speak the word, after you take the step, after you act as if. This is where faith becomes practical. Faith isn't hoping really hard. Faith is acting on the word before you see the evidence. It's writing the check before the money's in the account because you know the source. It's accepting the invitation before you know how you'll afford it because you trust the supply. It's thanking God for what hasn't manifested. Yet because you understand that, in the invisible, it already exists complete and perfect. Let me tell you about another divine appointment that illustrates this perfectly. A young man named Robert came to one of my gatherings years ago. He was an artist, brilliantly talented, but completely broke. He was bitter about it too. He would say things like, the world doesn't value real art, the system is rigged against people like me, I'll never get a fair chance. And I stopped him right there. I said, Robert, do you know what you're doing? You're cursing your own gift. You're speaking limitation over the very talent God gave you to prosper. He looked startled. I continued. Jesus said, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. You're binding your own success with your words. And then I taught him one of the most powerful hidden teachings from Jesus. The teaching about agreeing. Jesus said, if two of you agree on earth about anything they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. Most people think this is just about prayer partners, but it's deeper. It's about the agreement between your conscious and subconscious mind. It's about the agreement between your words and your beliefs. When those two agree, when they align, manifestation is instant and inevitable. Robert had talent. That was never the problem. But his conscious words of lack were in complete disagreement with the abundance his gift was meant to produce. He was double-minded. And Jesus said, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways and should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. So I gave Robert an assignment. I told him to stand in front of his art every single day and speak these words. My gift makes room for me and brings me before great men. God's lavish abundance flows through my talent. I am compensated abundantly for the beauty I create. The right people see my work and pay magnificently for it. I told him to feel it as already done, to thank God for it before he saw it. At first, Robert resisted. It felt false to him, arrogant even. And I explained, this isn't arrogance. Arrogance is thinking you did it by yourself. This is recognition. You're recognizing that the gift came from God. And God doesn't give gifts meant to be hidden under a bushel. He gives them to be used, to be multiplied, to be shared. I've watched people sabotage themselves at the very moment of their breakthrough. They finally land the opportunity they've been praying for, and suddenly they become small. They apologize for their success. They downplay their achievement. They say, oh, it's really not that big of a deal. But it is a deal. It's God's deal with you. When you diminish what God has given you, you're actually insulting the giver. You're saying, thanks, but I don't think this is really worth celebrating. That's not humility. That's ingratitude dressed up as modesty. True. Confidence doesn't need to diminish anyone else to shine. It doesn't require making yourself small so others feel big. Real spiritual confidence says, I recognize this gift in me, and I recognize the gifts in you. There's enough light for all of us. I knew a woman who was a magnificent singer. Her voice could move you to tears. But every time someone complimented her, she'd say, "Oh no, I'm really not that good. You should hear my sister. She's the talented one." One day I asked her, "Why do you reject every compliment that comes your way?" She looked surprised. "I'm not rejecting them. I'm just being humble." "No," I said. "You're being dishonest. You're lying about what God has given you. And every time you do it, you push your good away." That hit her hard. She'd never thought of it that way. Within weeks of accepting her gift with grace, simply saying thank you when complimented instead of deflecting, her opportunities tripled. She was asked to sing at venues she'd only dreamed of. Why? Because energy follows acknowledgement. When you acknowledge what's good in your life, you create space for more good to enter. This is the law. Acceptance attracts. Rejection repels. And here's what most people don't understand. Your confidence gives others permission to be confident. Your willingness to own your gifts encourages others to own theirs. When you stand fully in what God has given you, you're not taking anything away from anyone else. You're actually showing them what's possible. I've seen this happen over and over. One person in a family or friend group starts living boldly, stops apologizing for their success, and suddenly everyone around them starts rising too. It's like permission ripples outward. But the opposite is also true. When you shrink yourself to make others comfortable, you're actually giving them permission to stay small too. Think about it. When you dim your light, you're teaching everyone around you that playing small is the acceptable way to live. You're modeling fear instead of faith. You're showing them that dreams should be whispered, not declared. And then, everyone stays stuck together in this polite, suffocating agreement to never truly fly. I've seen it in families where one person dares to break the poverty mindset, and suddenly siblings start thriving. I've watched it in workplaces, where one person refuses to participate in victim mentality, and gradually the entire culture shifts. Your courage becomes contagious. But so does your cowardice. And here's something most people never consider. The universe doesn't just respond to what you say you want. It responds to the version of yourself you're willing to become. You can affirm abundance all day long, but if you're still showing up as the person who apologizes for existing, who minimizes their wins, who plays small in rooms full of people playing small, then you're sending mixed signals into the quantum field of possibility. The universe reads your energy signature before it reads your words. It watches how you carry yourself. Does your posture say, "I deserve this," or "I hope nobody notices me"? Does your voice carry conviction or apology? Do you take up space, or do you contort yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you? This is why transformation often feels uncomfortable at first. You're literally embodying a new frequency. You're walking differently, talking differently, making decisions differently. People who knew the old you will feel disoriented. They'll try to pull you back to the familiar version, not because they're bad people, but because your evolution is forcing them to confront their own stagnation. This is where most people falter. They misinterpret resistance as a sign they're on the wrong path. Let me tell you something crucial. Resistance is not rejection. From the universe, it's confirmation you're moving into new territory. When you were playing small, nobody cared. Now that you're stepping into your power, suddenly everyone has an opinion about what you should or shouldn't do. I watched a woman transform this pattern completely. For years, she dimmed her light at family gatherings, pretended to struggle so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable with her success. She was literally apologizing for her abundance. Then something shifted. She stopped performing poverty consciousness to make others comfortable. She shared her wins without shrinking them. She spoke about her vision without qualifying it with self-deprecation. The backlash was immediate. Relatives called her arrogant. Friends stopped inviting her to certain gatherings. Her own mother said she'd changed in a tone that made it sound like a disease. But here's what happened next. The people who were meant to walk with her into this new chapter revealed themselves. New friendships formed with individuals operating at her frequency. Business opportunities emerged from unexpected places. Her income tripled within months because she stopped energetically, apologizing for wanting more. You cannot upgrade your life while downgrading yourself to fit old relationships. Period. This doesn't mean you abandon people with cold hearts. It means you stop contorting yourself into shapes that no longer fit your soul. You love them from your new elevation, not from your old basement. And here's the part that will really challenge you sometimes. The person resisting your transformation the most is your own partner, your own family, the people sleeping in the same house. They benefit from the old you. The old you was predictable, manageable, safe. This new version, you're becoming untamable, and that terrifies people who've built their security around your limitations. So here's what you do. You stop explaining yourself. You stop defending your growth. You stop trying to make your transformation palatable for people who are still addicted to your old story. Your evolution is not a debate. It's not up for committee approval. It's not something that requires consensus or a unanimous vote from everyone who knew you when you were smaller. I learned this the hard way. I used to think that if I could just articulate my changes clearly, enough. If I could just help people understand why I was different now, they'd come around. They'd celebrate with me. They'd support the journey. But that's not how it works. Because your growth isn't actually confusing to them, it's threatening. They understand it perfectly. That's the problem. They understand that you're no longer willing to stay small so they can feel big. You're no longer willing to play the supporting role in their story while abandoning the lead role in your own. And let me tell you something that'll set you free. Their resistance to your growth is actually none of your business. It's not your job to manage other people's discomfort with your evolution. It's not your responsibility to shrink so they can breathe easier. It's not your assignment to pause your becoming so they can catch up. You're not breaking. You're breaking free. And anyone who can't tell the difference isn't qualified to have an opinion about your journey. The people who are meant to walk with you into this next chapter will recognize what's happening. They'll see the light in your eyes. They'll feel the authenticity radiating from you. They'll celebrate the fact that you're finally becoming who you've always been, underneath all those layers of performance and people-pleasing. But the ones who are attached to the old version, they're going to call your boundary setting mean. They're going to call your authenticity selfish. They're going to call your standards judgmental. They're going to diagnose your healing as a personality disorder. Let them. Their interpretation of your liberation is not your concern. Because here's what they won't tell you. Your healing threatens the equilibrium of their dysfunction. Your boundaries expose the toxicity they've normalized. Your peace reveals the chaos they've been calling connection. You're not the problem. You're the mirror they can't stand to look into. And yes, it's going to cost you. I'm not going to stand here and pretend otherwise. Some relationships will end. Some people will walk away. Some doors will close that you thought were permanent fixtures in your life. But listen carefully. What you're losing isn't what you think you're losing. You're not losing love. You were never experiencing love. You were experiencing performance, transaction, conditional acceptance at best. Real love doesn't require you to betray yourself to keep it. Real love doesn't demand your silence as the price of admission. Real love doesn't make you smaller so it can feel bigger. When you start healing, when you start speaking your truth, when you start setting boundaries, you're not losing love. You're finally making room for it. I know you're scared. I know you've been taught that being alone is the worst thing that could happen to you. I know you've internalized the lie that any connection is better than no connection. But let me tell you what's worse than being alone. Being surrounded by people and still feeling completely unseen. Sitting at a table full of family and feeling like a stranger. Being in a relationship and having to edit every sentence before it leaves your mouth. That's not connection. That's captivity with witnesses. The people who truly love you will not be threatened by your evolution. They will not punish you for your growth. They will not require you to stay broken to maintain their comfort. The ones who matter will say, I see you changing. I see you healing. I'm proud of you. Even if it's uncomfortable. Even if it challenges them. Even if it means the relationship itself has to transform. And for those who can't do that, for those who need you to stay stuck to feel secure, you're going to have to love them from a distance. Not with cruelty, not with bitterness, but with clear, unwavering boundaries. You can honor what they once were to you while accepting what they can no longer be. That's not abandonment, that's wisdom. Because there's something profoundly freeing about releasing someone from the prison of your expectations. They never asked to be your savior, your therapist, your constant cheerleader, your validation machine. They were just themselves, showing up the best way they knew how. And when their best stopped aligning with your needs, the kindest thing you could do was set them free. I'm not saying it's easy, I'm saying it's necessary. There's a woman I know who spent 3 years trying to resurrect a friendship that had clearly flatlined. Every coffee date felt like an audition she was failing. Every text thread petered out into awkward silence. She kept showing up because she thought loyalty meant never giving up. But loyalty shouldn't cost you your peace. Eventually, she realized she wasn't fighting for the friendship, she was fighting against reality. When she finally stopped forcing it, she felt guilty for about 2 weeks. Then she felt something unexpected: relief, space, room to breathe. And in that space, new connections began to grow. People who matched her energy, who showed up without being chased, who wanted to be there. Here's what I want you to understand. You're not obligated to keep watering dead plants just because you once loved watching them bloom. You're not required to maintain relationships that require you to shrink, to perform, to constantly prove your worth. Some connections have expiration dates, and that's okay. That's natural. That's life doing what life does, evolving, shifting, making room for what's next. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is bless someone from a distance. Send them well wishes in your heart. Hope they find their peace. And then turn your attention to the relationships that feed you, that meet you halfway, that don't require you to be anyone other than who you are. Because here's what I've learned. You can only hold so much. Your heart, your energy, your time, it's all limited, finite. And if you keep pouring into a cup that leaks, into hands that won't hold, into spaces that don't honor what you're giving, you'll have nothing left for the people who actually show up for you. I used to think loyalty meant staying, that love meant enduring, that the measure of my goodness was how much I could tolerate without breaking. But that's not loyalty, that's self-abandonment. That's letting other people write the story of your worth while you stand there, waiting for your turn to matter. True loyalty is mutual, real love is reciprocal. And the most sacred thing you can do is protect space you've worked so hard to clear. So yes, release them. The takers, the users, the ones who only call when they need something. The friends who compete instead of celebrate. The family members who demand your presence but never acknowledge your pain. The partners who keep you guessing, keep you small, keep you auditioning for a role you've already earned. Let them go with grace. Let them go with love. But most importantly, let them go. Because on the other side of that release, there's room. Room for the people who see you and stay. Room for the relationships that grow you instead of shrink you. Room for the kind of connection that doesn't require you to dim your light so someone else can feel comfortable in their darkness. And maybe, just maybe, as you clear that space, you'll realize you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong people. You were standing in front of closed doors, knocking until your knuckles bled, when all along there were open windows just waiting for you to climb through. The people who are meant for you, they won't make you wonder. They won't make you chase. They won't make you feel like your needs are a burden or your dot. Boundaries are a betrayal. They'll meet you. They'll match you. They'll remind you that real connection isn't something you earn, it's something you share. And that's worth making space for.